Imagine an Egyptian princess flying through the air on her white horse in a surprise attack on the magicians who killed her husband. Tragically, she underestimates the width of the valley she's leaping across and falls down to her death. Her sons fight on, defeat the magicians, and name this whole island of Ireland in her honour. It's her grave we've come to visit. We're here in Scotia, outside Tralee, at the site known as the tomb of Scota, who's variously known too as Scotia or Scotia. One of the earliest names for the island of Ireland is Scotia, a name that later was transferred to the northern part of Britain, which we call Scotland. In the early medieval period though, the word Scotus meant someone from Ireland. The legend of Scota is a kind of origin myth for this name, and it forms part of a much bigger complex of tales known as the Lebor Gabála Érenn, the book of the invasions of Ireland. The development of this legendarium can be traced from the 7th century, and it was clearly motivated by the desire of monastic scholars to connect the Irish story with the biblical story. They interweave biblical history with that of the ancestors of the Irish. So on this account, the first inhabitants of Ireland are Kesser, Noah's granddaughter, and her entourage. All of them end up drowning in the Great Flood, except for one, Fintan MacBóchra, who transforms into a salmon. As for the Irish people themselves, they were given, in this legend, various ancestors who were imagined to have played a part at key moments in biblical history. Féinius Farsad and Goidel Glas are two of these. They're placed at the fall of the Tower of Babel, and they're credited with the invention of the Irish language. And their personal names, of course, are associated with names for the Irish people, and from these words we get the words we use today, Fenian and Gael. In this story, the Irish turn up also in Egypt at the time of the exodus of the Israelites. From there, they make their way eventually to Ireland, led by a man called Milesian, whose sons defeat a race of magicians known as the Tuatha. These Milesians, these wanderers with the biblical past, then settle down throughout the island of Ireland, where they live to this day. That's the story. Now, we should take all of this with a massive grain of salt. We're not here in the realm of history, but literature. And scholars who trace the development of the Lebor Gabála have shown that it was added to progressively. It's a story that grows legs and morphs into many different versions with an ever-growing cast of characters. The best analogy I can think of is Star Wars. It starts off as a simple story in George Lucas's head, but once others become committed to this imagined world, they produce their own narratives, leading to the Star Wars canon, a sprawling universe of stories. That's what's going on in the Lebor Gabála. It's not a case of ancient origins being transmitted faithfully over millennia, but ancient origins being imagined and constructed in the medieval period. There may be tiny grains of truth here and there in it, but it's nearly impossible to identify them. What about Scota then? She's actually a late addition to the cast of characters, and she has different, entirely contradictory storylines. In the early versions of the story, there's no mention of her at all. But as the story grows, she appears in one version as the daughter of an Egyptian pharaoh who becomes the daughter-in-law of Féinius Farsad and the mother of Goidel Glas, whom we've met already. This is not the version, though, that gets her to Tralee. That version has her living not at the time of the Tower of Babel, but at the time of the Exodus. Her father in this story is the pharaoh whose forces are drowned in the Red Sea, chasing Moses. In this version of the story, Scota marries Milesian and leaves Egypt with him at the same time as the Israelites are heading on their exodus. Mil and Scota settle in Spain first and then move on to Ireland, where they both die in battle with the Tuatha. What's fascinating about this story, though, is how it continued to be told in many different registers and contexts over the following centuries, and it continued to grow legs. In the 17th century, the scholar Geoffrey Keating, in his book Foras Fasa Érenn, takes these stories very seriously. And it's he who first reports that Scota's grave is here in this valley. He actually quotes a few lines of poetry to demonstrate this point, so it's certainly a tradition that predates him. Unfortunately, archaeologists who excavated this site some years ago found nothing to suggest that it's anyone's grave at all. In any case, Keating's identification of this place as the grave of Scota lives on in local folklore here in the Tralee area. And this giant warrior queen of the past has lived vividly in the imagination of local children, even if she never lived in history. And it's quite fitting that she lives in the imagination, since it's in the imagination that she was born, as learned monks dreamt up a biblical past for the people of this island.